I don't think Amanda ever expected me to smile when she told me she wanted a divorce. In fact, I'm pretty sure it wasn't even a possibility in her mind. She had rehearsed this moment, probably in front of a mirror, trying to perfect that delicate balance between firm and victimized. The way she lowered herself into the chair across from me at the kitchen table, fingers laced together like she was delivering a eulogy rather than dropping a bomb, made it clear she thought this was her moment of control. She even let out a deep, theatrical sigh, like she was about to do something noble and heartbreaking. And then, finally, she said it. "I think we should get a divorce." The words left her lips, hanging in the air between us like an echo she expected to shatter me. But instead of reacting the way she had planned, instead of anger or pleading, I smiled. And not just any smile, a slow, easy, satisfied kind of grin. The kind of smile someone has when they finally take their first deep breath after holding it in for way too long. Amanda's face twitched, just for a second. A crack in her confidence. She had been expecting rage, maybe some bargaining, possibly even heartbreak. What she hadn't prepared for, what had never crossed her mind, was indifference. "Okay," I said, leaning back in my chair. Her eyes narrowed. "That's it." I nodded, feeling lighter than I had in years. "That's it." She blinked, clearly thrown off her game. "You don't want to talk about it? Do we need to?" And that's when I saw it. Just the faintest flicker of something in her expression. Hesitation, maybe even regret. Not quite, but close enough. She had been distant for months, avoiding me, making excuses to stay late at work or go out with friends I had never heard of before. She thought I was blind to it, that I hadn't noticed how she suddenly cared so much more about her appearance when she went out, yet barely acknowledged me when she was home. She thought I didn't see the way she smiled at her phone, but never at me. So no, I didn't need to talk about it. Because I already knew. Amanda had someone else. And she thought she was upgrading. That's why she had expected resistance. Because that's how these situations usually play out. The husband gets blindsided, begs her to stay, pleads, makes desperate promises to change. And the wife. She sighs, acts heartbroken, pretends this is difficult while secretly enjoying the power of watching him fall apart. But I wasn't going to give her that. Instead, I stood up, stretched my arms, and let out a relaxed sigh. "Honestly, this is great news, Amanda. I was starting to wonder how long we were going to keep pretending." Her mouth fell open slightly, but no words came out. For the first time in a long time, she was the one who didn't know what to say. I patted her shoulder in the most casual way possible, then walked over to the fridge and grabbed a beer. "So, do you want to split our stuff now, or should we do it over the weekend?" She didn't answer right away. Probably because this wasn't how it was supposed to go. But that was just the beginning. Amanda thought she was the one walking away, the one leaving me behind. What she didn't realize was that she was about to lose everything. Amanda didn't respond immediately. She just sat there, her carefully rehearsed lines crumbling right in front of her. I could almost hear the wheels turning in her head, trying to figure out why I wasn't reacting the way she had expected. She had treated this divorce like a chess match, assuming I'd panic the second she declared checkmate. What she hadn't realized was that I had left the game long before she made her move. I took a slow sip of my beer, leaning against the counter as I watched her. "So?" I prompted, raising an eyebrow. She parted her lips like she was about to speak, but nothing came out. Then, finally, she managed to recover some of her composure. "I think it would be best if I handled the paperwork first," she said, sitting up straighter, trying to reclaim some of the authority she thought she had. "We don't need to rush through this." Translation: she needed more time to get her ducks in a row. To make sure her plans with whoever she was running to were solid before she fully cut ties with me. "Sure," I said, nodding. "Take your time." Her eyes flickered with uncertainty. She had expected anger, maybe a fight. She had prepared for an argument, for me to try and convince her to stay, to guilt-trip her, to make her feel like she had control. But all she got was calm acceptance. And that was already throwing her off. That night, while she was busy avoiding me in the bedroom, I was laying out my own plans. If Amanda thought she was in control of this situation, she was about to get a wake-up call. First, I made a few phone calls. My lawyer, an old friend who owed me a favor, was more than happy to help. I sent over everything: bank statements, property deeds, even a few little details Amanda didn't think I knew about. Then, I checked our joint accounts. And, just as I suspected, there had been some questionable transactions lately. Withdrawals in odd increments, money disappearing without explanation. Amanda had been preparing for this for months. What she didn't know was that so had I. Over the next few days, I moved fast. While Amanda was out working late, or spending time with friends, I was making sure everything important was secured under my name. She had assumed I was just some clueless husband, blindly going about my routine, waiting for her to make the final move. She had underestimated me. The first sign of trouble came one morning over breakfast. I decided to drop a little hint, just enough to see how she'd react. "So, do you have a new place lined up?" I asked casually, pouring myself a cup of coffee. Amanda, still in her silk robe, looked up from her phone, blinking in confusion. "Excuse me." "Well," I said, sipping my coffee, "I assume you wouldn't be asking for a divorce without a plan. You wouldn't just leave yourself without a place to go, right?" She hesitated, the first real sign of uncertainty creeping in. "I was thinking of staying here until everything is finalized." There it was. She had expected to stay in the house I paid for, while I packed up and moved out like some kind of unwanted guest. I smiled. "Yeah, that's not gonna work for me." Her expression hardened. "What?" "I mean," I shrugged, setting down my mug, "you asked for the divorce. Seems fair that you figure out where to go from here. I wouldn't want to be in your way." Her fingers tightened around her coffee mug. "That's not how this works, Jake." "Actually," I said, tilting my head slightly, "it is." And that's when I saw the first real crack in her confidence. The moment she realized, just maybe, she had miscalculated. And I wasn't done yet. The day after Amanda dropped her little divorce bomb, I started noticing something interesting. She was nervous. Not the kind of nervous that comes from second thoughts or guilt. No, this was something else. This was the kind of nervousness that creeps in when you realize you're not as in control as you thought you were. She still tried to carry herself with that same cool confidence, but I could see the hesitation in the way she spoke, the way she kept checking her phone more than usual, the way she avoided eye contact when I was in the room. She had assumed I would be the one scrambling, the one panicking about what to do next. Instead, I was moving forward like nothing had happened. I was smiling, making plans, going about my life as if she had just done me the biggest favor in the world. And that was starting to mess with her. A few days later, I came home earlier than usual. I had some things I wanted to get in order, and I figured it'd be best to get a head start. Amanda wasn't expecting me. That much was obvious from the way her face froze when I walked through the door. She was sitting on the couch, phone in hand, mid-conversation. The second I stepped inside, she went silent. "Hey," I greeted casually, tossing my keys onto the table. She forced a smile. "Hey, you're home early." "Yeah," I said, stretching a little. "Figured I'd take the afternoon to start packing up some of my stuff." Her fingers tightened around her phone. I glanced at it. "Who are you talking to?" She shifted slightly. "Just a friend." I nodded, suppressing a smirk. "Nice. Must be a good friend if you stopped talking the second I walked in." She stiffened. "It's nothing, Jake." "Sure," I said with a shrug, letting it go for now. But I wasn't done. Later that night, after Amanda had gone to bed, I made my move. Months ago, she had changed the password on her phone. That was around the same time she started acting distant, when the secrecy started creeping into our marriage. But what she hadn't changed was her laptop. I sat at the kitchen table, scrolling through her emails, her messages, everything I could find. And there it was. Confirmation of what I had already suspected. She wasn't just leaving me, she was leaving me for someone else. His name was Ryan. And based on their messages, they had been seeing each other for nearly a year. A year. I should have been angry. I should have felt hurt, betrayed. But all I felt was amusement. Amanda thought she was playing me. Thought she had been outmaneuvering me, setting up her escape plan while I sat around clueless. But in reality, she was the one being played. Because Ryan wasn't just some guy. Ryan was broke. As I scrolled through their messages, it became painfully obvious. She hadn't just fallen for another man. She had fallen for a leech. There were messages of him asking her for help with bills, car payments, even sending her links to investment opportunities he wanted to get into, but only if she funded them. Oh, Amanda. You left a man who built a life for you, for a man who was about to drain you dry. And that's when I knew exactly how to play this. The next morning, I made breakfast like it was any other day. Pancakes, bacon, fresh coffee, the whole thing. When Amanda walked into the kitchen, she hesitated, clearly caught off guard. "Wow," she muttered, eyeing the spread. "What's all this?" I smiled. "Just thought I'd do something nice. You know, before the divorce and all." She studied me for a moment, as if trying to figure out if this was some kind of trap. "Right," she said, sitting down cautiously. I poured myself a cup of coffee. "So, I was thinking about what you said, about the divorce." Her eyes lit up, just slightly. "Oh yeah." I nodded. "I think you're right. We should end things quickly. No need to drag it out, right?" She smiled, sipping her coffee. "Exactly." I leaned back. "So, I'll have my lawyer fast-track everything. I'll sign over what's fair, and you can move on with your new life." Her smile faltered. Just for a second. "Oh," she said, setting down her mug. "That's great." She wasn't expecting that. She wasn't expecting any of this. But I wasn't done yet. Amanda thought she was winning. She thought she had everything lined up, that her new life was just within reach. What she didn't realize was that she had just walked into a trap. One she had set for herself. Over the next few days, I played the part of the perfect soon-to-be ex-husband. I was calm, agreeable, even supportive. I told Amanda I understood, that I just wanted her to be happy, that I had no interest in making this any harder than it needed to be. And she ate it up. She relaxed, let her guard down, started believing that everything was going exactly the way she wanted. The first real test came when she sat me down to talk about splitting our assets. "I was thinking," she started carefully, "that it might be best if I stay in the house. At least for a while." I smiled. "Oh, for sure. I get it." Her shoulders relaxed slightly. "Good. I mean, it just makes sense." "Yeah, absolutely," I agreed. "Makes perfect sense." She let out a small breath of relief, probably thinking she had won this round. Then I leaned forward. "Just one thing," I said, still smiling. She frowned. "What?" "The house," I said, taking a slow sip of my coffee. "It's not our house, Amanda. It's mine." Her forehead creased. "What are you talking about?" I set my mug down, watching her closely. "Remember when I refinanced last year?" She nodded hesitantly. "Well," I continued, "that wasn't just to get a better rate. I had the deed transferred solely to my name." I tilted my head slightly. "So, technically, you're a guest here." Her face paled. "That's not possible," she said, shaking her head. "Oh, but it is," I said, leaning back in my chair. "Which means that when the divorce is finalized, you're going to need to find somewhere else to stay." The silence that followed was golden. She was processing, scrambling, realizing that I wasn't the fool she had assumed I was. Finally, she scoffed, trying to regain control. "You're being ridiculous. I'll get half of everything in the divorce." I grinned. "No, you won't." And that's when I dropped the real bomb. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a folded document, sliding it across the table. Amanda hesitated before picking it up, her hands trembling slightly. "We signed this when we got married," I reminded her. "Remember?" Her eyes flicked across the paper, her face tightening as she read it. It was our prenup. In black and white, clear as day, stating that what's mine stays mine. Including the house. Including my savings. And considering she was the one who filed, the court wasn't exactly going to look favorably on any requests she might have. She looked up at me, her mouth slightly open, struggling to find the right words. "You really thought you were about to walk away with half of everything?" I asked, shaking my head. She swallowed hard. "You really thought I was that stupid?" A dozen emotions flickered across her face: shock, disbelief, panic, and then something closer to fear. I stood up, stretching my arms. "You know the funny thing," I mused, walking toward the sink. "I probably would have given you something. If you had just been honest. If you had come to me and told me you weren't happy." I turned back to face her. "But instead, you played games." I shrugged. "And now? You get nothing." She pushed back her chair, standing quickly. "You can't just throw me out like this." I raised an eyebrow. "Why not?" I need time," she stammered. "I need to figure things out." I smiled. "Should have thought about that before you started dating a guy who can't even afford his own apartment." Her jaw tightened. And that was it. The final confirmation. She had really thrown away everything for a guy who couldn't even support himself. I walked past her, heading for the door. "You've got a month, Amanda," I said over my shoulder. "After that, you're on your own." I didn't wait for her response, because for the first time in years, I was the one walking away. The shift in Amanda was immediate. For months, maybe even years, she had carried herself like she was in control, like she was the one calling the shots, the one holding all the power in our marriage. But the moment she realized she wasn't walking away with half of everything, that she wasn't getting the clean break she had envisioned, the cracks in her perfect facade started to show. The first few days were entertaining, to say the least. At first, she pretended like nothing had changed. She still walked around the house like she belonged there. Still acted like my little reveal had been nothing more than a minor inconvenience. But I could see the truth. She was spiraling. She had planned for every possible reaction I could have: anger, bargaining, even an attempt to win her back. But she had never planned for this. She never expected to be the one caught off guard. And it was driving her insane. The first real crack came when she started picking unnecessary fights. I had just finished making dinner for myself: steak, roasted vegetables, a glass of wine, when she came storming into the kitchen. "Oh, so now you're cooking for yourself," she snapped. I cut into my steak, completely unbothered. "Yeah. I was hungry." She crossed her arms. "You never used to cook when we were together." I chewed, swallowed, and shrugged. "Maybe I didn't feel like it back then." She scoffed. "Wow. Real mature, Jake." I took another bite. "You're the one yelling over a steak, Amanda." Her fists clenched. "You're just enjoying this, aren't you?" I set my fork down, wiped my mouth with a napkin, and looked at her. "Enjoying what?" She gestured vaguely around the kitchen. "This. Watching me struggle." "Watching me?" I tilted my head. "Watching you what?" She hesitated. And that's when it hit me. She was struggling. I had assumed she would immediately move in with Ryan, her new guy. But the way she was acting, the way she was still here, still pretending she had any control, told me something she hadn't admitted yet. Ryan hadn't let her move in, which meant she had nowhere to go. I leaned back in my chair, suppressing a smirk. "Is something wrong, Amanda?" She shot me a glare. "Screw you." Then she stormed out. And I just sat there, sipping my wine, enjoying the moment. The next day, I decided to push things a little further. I had been planning to redecorate the house for a while, but now? Now, it was personal. I spent the morning boxing up all of Amanda's things: her clothes, her makeup, her stupid little decorative candles she insisted on keeping in every room. By the time she came home that evening, the house already looked different. She froze in the doorway, staring at the neatly stacked boxes near the entrance. "What the hell is this?" I smiled. "Just getting a head start." Her mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. "You can't just pack up my stuff." I shrugged. "It's not your stuff anymore. You said you wanted out, remember?" She stormed over, grabbing one of the boxes and yanking it open. "This is ridiculous," she snapped. "I still live here." I leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "Actually, you don't." Her eyes snapped up to mine. "Excuse me." I pulled out my phone, scrolled for a second, then turned the screen toward her. It was a copy of our lease agreement. The lease that had my name on it. Not hers. You were never on the paperwork, Amanda, I said, my voice casual but firm. You lived here because we were married. But now, legally, you're just a guest. Her face went completely pale. For the first time, she was the one without options. For the first time, she wasn't the one in control. She swallowed hard. You're not serious. I slipped my phone back into my. Her hands curled into fists. You can't just throw me out. I sighed, rubbing the back of my neck. I don't know what to tell you, Amanda. Maybe Ryan has a couch you can crash on. Her jaw clenched at the mention of his name. And that's when I knew, without a shadow of a doubt, Ryan wasn't working out the way she thought he would. She had walked away from a stable life, convinced she was upgrading. And now she was realizing she had made the biggest mistake of her life. Amanda was unraveling. I could see it in the way she carried herself, the way her once perfect composure started cracking at the edges. She was used to being in control, used to manipulating situations to her advantage. But now, the script had flipped, and she had no idea how to handle it. The next few days were a spectacle. She tried everything: passive aggression, fake apologies, even an attempt at seduction. Which, honestly, would have been hilarious if it wasn't so pathetic. But I stayed calm, unmoved, completely indifferent. And that was what drove her insane. The real meltdown started when she got a text from Ryan in the middle of dinner. I wasn't paying much attention at first. I was too busy enjoying the steak I had made for myself. But the second I heard her phone buzz, I noticed the way she stiffened. The way her fingers tightened around her fork. The way her whole demeanor changed in an instant. I leaned back in my chair, watching as she hesitated before picking up her phone. Whatever she saw on the screen made her face go pale. Something wrong? I asked casually, sipping my wine. She forced a tight smile. No. Just something I need to take care of. She stood up abruptly, taking her phone with her as she walked out of the room. I waited a few seconds, then followed. She was in the living room, pacing back and forth, phone pressed tightly to her ear. What do you mean? She hissed. You promised. A pause. No, Ryan. We talked about this. I told you I'd have everything ready. Another pause. No, you don't get to just, Ryan? Ryan. Silence. Then, she let out a frustrated noise and threw her phone onto the couch. I took that as my cue. That didn't sound good. She whirled around, eyes blazing. Were you listening to me? I smirked. Hard not to when you're practically screaming. She exhaled sharply, running a hand through her hair. It's nothing. I tilted my head. Because it sounded like Ryan just bailed on you. Her jaw clenched. I laughed, shaking my head. Wow. He really left you hanging, huh? Guess that whole new life thing didn't work out the way you thought it would. Shut up, Jake. No, really, I continued, my voice dripping with mock concern. Where are you gonna go now? You do have a backup plan, right? She swallowed hard. And that's when it hit me. She didn't. For months, she had been so confident, so smug, thinking she had everything figured out. She thought she was upgrading. Thought she was trading me in for something better. But now, she was standing in front of me, completely lost. Completely alone. And she had no one to blame but herself. The next day, I decided to take things one step further. I had been patient, letting her come to terms with the fact that she had made a mistake. But now, it was time to speed things up. While she was out, probably trying to figure out where the hell she was going to live, I changed the locks. It was completely legal. I owned the house. She wasn't on the lease. And she had already filed for divorce. I had no obligation to let her stay. So when she came home later that night and tried to open the door, only to find that her key didn't work, I sat back on the couch and waited. The banging started almost immediately. Jake, she shouted. Open the damn door. I took my time finishing my drink before finally standing up and unlocking it, just enough to look at her. Her face was flushed. Her eyes were wild. What the hell did you do? I smiled. Oh, I just figured. Since you're leaving soon anyway, There was no point in keeping the old locks. Her hands curled into fists. "You can't do this." I leaned against the doorframe. "I can." And I did. She stared at me, breathing heavily. Then her face crumbled. "Jake, please," she whispered. I don't have anywhere else to go." I raised an eyebrow. "Not my problem, Amanda." She swallowed hard, her eyes darting around like she was looking for an escape. Can we talk, please?" I let the silence stretch for a moment before answering. "No." Then I closed the door in her face. And that was the moment she realized she had lost everything. The next morning, I stepped outside to get my mail, half expecting to see Amanda curled up on the porch. But she wasn't there. Instead, there was a crumpled note stuck between the door and the frame. "Jake, please. I need to talk to you. Just 5 minutes. Please. No apology. No, I messed up. Just I need something from you." Typical Amanda. I didn't bother replying. She had made her bed. Now, she had to lie in it. A few hours later, I got my answer. I was sitting in my car at a red light when I saw her. She was standing outside a cafe, hunched over her phone, looking rough. Her hair was messy. Her clothes were wrinkled. She didn't look like the polished, put-together woman she used to be. And the best part? She wasn't alone. Ryan was there too. And he looked pissed. I watched from a distance as they argued. Amanda kept gesturing wildly, pleading, while Ryan stood there with his arms crossed, shaking his head. Then, finally, he turned and walked away. Just like that, Amanda was officially out of options. I should have driven off. Should have left her standing there in the cold. But I wanted to see what she'd do next. She stood frozen for a moment, her hands clenching into fists. Then, slowly, she turned and started looking around. And then, her eyes landed on me. For a second, neither of us moved. Then, cautiously, she started walking toward my car. I could see it all over her face. The regret. The desperation. The realization that she had lost everything. I rolled down the window. Something wrong. She swallowed hard. "Jake, I held up a hand. "No." She blinked. "What?" "I know what you're about to do," I said. "You're about to say you're sorry. You're about to tell me you made a mistake. That you were confused. That you didn't know what you were doing. And then, after that, you're going to ask me for help." Her eyes flickered. But here's the thing," I continued. "I don't care." She sucked in a sharp breath. "I gave you everything," I said. "A life. A home. Security. And you threw it all away because you thought you could do better." Her lips trembled. I wasn't thinking." I smirked. "Yeah. That much is obvious." She opened her mouth. Then closed it again. For the first time in her life, she had nothing to say. I put the car in drive. "Goodbye, Amanda." She reached out, maybe to say something else, one last desperate plea. But before she could, I rolled up the window and drove away. I didn't look back. Not once. Because, for the first time in years, I was finally free. Thank you for visited my YouTube channel. Your support, likes, and comments truly inspire me to create even more engaging content. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. You're a part of this amazing community, and I'm thrilled to share my stories with you. See you in the next video on YouTube.